All right, there we go. I don't see a lot on the agenda today, as in actually we didn't write an agenda for this morning's meeting. The only outstanding item that I'm aware of that we've been working on is the roadmap. So we could spend this time trying to finalize that, or if there's other items, we can deal with those.
I think it might be useful to talk about Envoy filter while we've got folks here, because I've been seeing questions in TOC steering chat, and it's somewhat time sensitive due to the 126 release. As things stand, if we let 126 ship as is, my filter will be blocked, which will be breaking for 126. It sounded like in some internal TOC discussion that we were leaning towards maybe allowing Envoy filter in the future, if potentially changing it. If that's the path we're going, it seems like it would be very jarring to block Envoy filter in this release and then re-enable it in a future release. Seems like a bit of unnecessary churn. One thing I thought about doing was perhaps we revert the blocking of Envoy filter in 126, keep the status quo, and then decide what we want to do to have like a better waypoint, specifically Envoy filter in the context of ambient. I should have clarified that. And then in 127 or whatever release, basically gives us time to be able to approach ambient Envoy filter as robustly as we would like. So that's my spiel. What are other people's thoughts?
Could you mention like staying with status quo? Could you or someone else explain what the status quo is? Because I thought we had never supported Envoy filter in ambient.
Not officially. The status quo is that things somewhat sort of work for some use cases for Envoy filter. And some people have been able, I think Zhonghu, even Z-Rain are able to get it working for certain use cases. Whereas in the code base today, it is a sort of full block where we do not apply Envoy filter period purposefully in ambient. Whereas before, if you fiddle with it enough, you can get it to work for certain use cases.
So we did explicitly say it wasn't supported in the release notes. Like it's one thing for like two maintainers like Zhonghu and Zirang to have gotten it working. It's a whole other thing for users.
That's true. I agree with that. My only concern is the flip-flopping of we're going to disable it in this release, and then potentially in the next release, we're going to turn it back on, maybe with new API fields and all this sort of stuff. I don't know if that churn is worth it. I don't know what it's buying us.
Yeah, probably nothing. But on the other hand, if anybody tries to give the feature in its current state to users, right, like they should not expect that to work and be back compatible. Right, because we've made no guarantees about that at all, right? Like, because we explicitly, like, so the feature is technically in dev, right? Like, it's not even an alpha.
Sure.
So that would be the assessed state of the feature, which means we can and will break you. So people are like, we can leave it unblocked, so to speak, but it's not usable for users, right? We would never claim it was a supported feature publicly.
Yes. I would agree with that. If we do decide to stick with the status quo, that we're not claiming support, we're just allowing the brokenness to work. We would just be allowing the brokenness to be there for a time period.
Right now, the argument in favor of if like hard turning it off is so we don't accidentally have a user fall into a bear trap. Devs can obviously do what they want, right? They can go and patch the branch and build and turn off the hard block, right? Post-release, like it could be the first PR into main after. But I'd rather not users have accidentally fall into Envoy filter bear traps in ambient when we don't even know what the API is.
Sure. Yeah, that I'm good with either one. I just wanted to sort of put the options on the table and see where people land. I do think that this sort of dovetails nicely into Mitch's topic about roadmap, because I think one of the things that's made this confusing is sort of the silence from TOC, from us and the project. And so I think in 126, I don't know what the timelines are, but it would make the message land better, I think, if we could say, hey, we're turning it off here. We plan to address this in a future release in the calendar year. Like, I think that would be a much easier message versus we're turning it off. We might get around to it. Sort of, just the nebulousness, I think, is been difficult for people.
Do we have to turn it off in 126? What would be the advantages? Sorry, I joined a few minutes late.
Just preventing users from accidentally becoming dependent.
But they are already using it. If they are,
no, they're not. Right. The only two examples Keith gave were Zonghu and Ziran. Right. So those are maintainers.
Right. I'm saying if they are already using it, they are like super advanced user, and they probably know Istio really well. They probably already know it's not supported, and they choose to exploit.
It seems like this might be a good candidate for guarding with an environment variable. If we say it's their default disabled, but for the handful of users that have stumbled into them already, since they have been implicitly enabled, well, for a while now, right? At least since 124, they have a path forward where we're not breaking them and then re-enabling them later in the year. They can sort of limp forward while our default user doesn't stumble into it.
We keep saying the word user, Mitch. You keep saying the word user as if we have evidence that there are any users. We have users asking first, like that much is very clear. I just don't want to have actual users, right, in production with it.
Right.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind is that the user might be users of maintainers. So if, let's say, Ziran and Zhanghu are using Envoy Filter to provide a custom rate limiting API, those are still users. And not necessarily the OSS project, but
yeah, like so they're vendored, right? And they could still get broken. Or it's on Zonghu and Ziran, right, to make sure that whatever they vend is stable, right? That's not our problem. That's their problem if they're doing that.
Sure. I agree with that. I just want to add context that when we say user, there's more to users of Envoy Filter than just people who are natively using the resource. There's even an open source limiting API. That's all I want to call it.
Right, but our contract is what we said in the release notes.
Sure. Do you know which release notes mentioned that Envoy Filter is not supported?
I think they were the very first release of Ambient. It was quite explicit.
122?
Yeah, there was 122. I think John did a blog. It was a upgrade / release note of. It was the beta announcement. Here's what's beta in Ambient, and here's what's alpha, and then here's what's unsupported. And Envoy Filter is in that last category. I'm pretty sure of no support, not there.
I remember from the beginning, we've been always communicate this is not supported. It's like for the past 2 years, every single blog, if we touch Envoy Filter, we always say it's not supported. So, I mean, we can't control maintainers, their behaviors, because they may have their own distro. I mean, I think that's fine.
Right. Yeah. It's just like we're just talking about the Istio release here, so we just have to decide. So I just want to differentiate between vendors and users, and who we are. Like vendors can obviously go and support Envoy Filter however they choose, and deal with the consequences of that. I just don't want like direct users of Istio to fall into the trap.
Yeah, one more piece of context is that it's already disabled. John submitted a PR to disable it a couple months ago. I'm not opposed to Mitch's idea of. I'm really not opposed to anything. I'm sort of just where the consensus goes, I guess. But Mitch's suggestion of having an environment variable to disable said blocking does add some complexity to the code base, just because you have extra conditional, but feels like we accomplish both goals of not adding blockers to vendors or advanced users who can get Envoy filter working for the specific use case, while protecting new users.
So like vendors can deal with this. Like they don't need our help to do that, right? Like they can patch. Whereas an advanced user, right, is the thing we're specifically trying to prevent.
I guess the question is, I mean, you're right, it's very hypothetical. We don't know who has or hasn't started using this feature. The question is, if there are advanced users who have existing utilization of this API, is it better to give them an install time parameter to say, I kind of acknowledge this is alpha or pre-alpha, and I'm taking it, but I want it to keep working? Or is it better to say, hey, this was never really supported, let's break you for now, and we'll re-enable you in 6 months or so when we feel like we can offer real full support for Envoy filter on ambient?
Does anybody have any evidence that any user, actual direct user, is using it?
I had users tell me at KubeCon at the booth that Envoy filter does work in ambient. Now, I did not drill into what are they doing with it or how. I didn't realize that we had not completely blocked it. So I just told them they were wrong, and they told me I was wrong, and that was about the end of it.
So it's break now or break later, then, is the choice, right? One way or the other.
Well, I think it's break now and later, or break later, right? Like the re-enable, we don't expect to just be able to take their Envoy filters as they are and re-enable them. Right. We expect it's going to be an API change. So yes. If they've got an API change coming up, do we want to have them do that API change when it's available, or first disable the API altogether and then later enable a new API that then they have to migrate to?
And they can't pay the cost now because we don't know what the API is. So there is no way for them to productively use this time, right? It's a double penalty. Which is fine. Again, I think it's Louis' point's very important that like our contract with Envoy filter has always been this will break. So we're not violating any of our principles if we decide to break twice. But I think it's a part of our role, sort of shepherding the project, is to try to make things easier where we can, where we feel comfortable to, and try to go away from unnecessary pain.
Do you guys think it might be a good idea to do a quick poll? Because we have 1,000 users on ambient. We could just ask them to raise hand if they're using ambient. And with Envoy filter with Waypoint, so that we can get a little bit of data. Because I basically haven't heard people using it.
That almost seems more dangerous, because then people might get the idea that they should try that.
No, when we ask, we will say this is not supported, and it's currently, if I understood correctly, it's currently disabled. So we'd like to understand the impact. I mean, certainly
it's not currently disabled. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Okay. In the 126 release branch, it is disabled. So
right.
126.
He said that. Okay, yeah, it's currently disabled for upcoming future release, right? Yeah, that's what we want to work. But we want to make sure this decision makes sense, or that we want to get some feedback on this decision. So that would be what we would the message. My personal feeling is I hate to break people twice, so I don't feel strongly we need to disable it. We say it very, very loud, hey, we don't support it.
But we're not really breaking someone twice. Like, we're breaking them and not giving them the fix until way later, right? As opposed to delaying and giving them the break and the fix at the same time.
Well, you would break them twice, because if Mitch and Keith said, let's say there's 2 users using Envoy filter with Waypoint, right? When we release 126, if we disable it, then their function, which could enforce some policy, would be broken.
Right. But the only difference between the 2 proposals is the delay about when they get the fix, right? We're not actually breaking twice, right? Because they would have to do work either way. it's break now and fix later, as opposed to break later and fix later.
I think the difference, Louis, is that typically users of Envoy Filter are not leveraging it for things that are optional in their service mesh.
Yeah, no, that, like it's
It's
how
a tool
critical
of
is the
last
breakage?
resort. So as we break
Right.
it now, they're going to need to find some alternative that
Or not upgrade.
that meets their needs to
Yeah,
bridge
or
the
not
gap.
upgrade.
And then as we enable Envoy Filter 2.0 or whatever we want to call that, they can either migrate back or stay with whatever alternative that they've identified.
Yeah, I'm fine with leave it the way it is. Put in the release notes. Look, this is broken. It will break. Usage is not supported by the community, and the API will change. Will change.
Yeah.
And you're going to get pain if you do this.
Well,
And we
I
don't
think
actually know what they're using it for. Like,
yeah. The way that we've signaled that in the past is usually by sticking things behind an environment variable, right? It's like if you're tweaking environment variables at install time, you are off the beaten path. You can probably get some of that stuff to work, but it's alpha support only or experimental support only, as the case may be. It seems to be a decent signal, and it prevents users from accidentally stumbling in. One of the things I'm worried about with leaving it entirely enabled, just completely as is I actually can't find anywhere in our release notes that it's not supported. It's not in the 122 release notes. It's not in the blog post announcing support. The word Envoy Filter does not occur. So we've always had a problem of users struggling to understand what's supported and what's not supported, and struggling to stay on the golden path, so to speak. But I feel like Ambient has sort of amplified that problem pretty substantially, because now there's a matrix of what's supported and what's not supported. So trying to give interactive feedback on that by actively blocking unless you enable this particular flag seems like the sweet spot.
yeah, I mean, the only problem with the flag, right, is it implies that the API might actually be stable.
I thought we've been pretty clear that well,
Right?
this is almost a loop of an argument. I was going to say, I thought we'd been clear that environment variables are all alpha, but where did we document that?
Yeah, our Envoy Filter documentation of it not being supported is absent documentation. So we have a list of here are the APIs that are supported for Ambient, and Envoy Filter is just missing. I'm doing the same search that Mitch is now to try to see where we document explicitly that Envoy Filter is not supported, and I don't see any affirmative documentation on that.
No.
What we've done in the past is we've had environment variables like unsafe underscore, like Mike says, unstable underscore, insecure underscore. We would put a bad thing at the beginning before the rest of the environment variable name to signal that there's a risky action that the user's explicitly opting into. This feels like this feels like a Hiram's Law problem where we've had an API that is in our system that people probably have got it to work in some really weird ways, but it works good enough for their use case. And now we're disabling it, and I worry that people will come in and saying this has been working, like holding my spacebar to make my CPU overheat actually does work, like the XKCD comic. Like we just know that we've been clear enough. We talked about what is supported and left Envoy Filter out. Is that sufficient for people to stop using Envoy Filter? I don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, we document. I think I was one of the people who worked on the document, and we focused only on what's supported, and we didn't make what's not supported very, very clear there.
Yeah, I guess the canonical example here is I asked Gemini, and you could probably ask ChatGPT the same thing, and it says it's supported for waypoints.
It says it is okay because we didn't. Okay.
Shoot me now. Yeah. Okay. I guess we have to leave it, but we should put in the release notes.
And also
I
update the doc.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't do the environment variable, Mitch. I just don't see the need. Yeah.
And I think like overall, probably an action item here is that we need to find a way to make it easier for our users to understand the support of various configurations. I think we have a fairly consistent and clear model in our heads. We seem to be on the same page about what's supported and what the level of support is, but it's not getting communicated to users very clearly. Obviously, there's a limitation to that. If they don't read release notes and never go to Istio.io, it's difficult to communicate anything. But at the very least, like, as you said, ChatGPT ought to be able to figure it out.
That's
One of them
actually
anyway.
giving it's giving me an idea for maybe we can talk about later. But I wonder if there isn't value in like AI proofing our documentation. Like if you feed in Istio docs to Gemini with new features and then ask it a set of prompts that we write as part of, release notes or whatever, AI should be able to give us the correct answer. Like at this point in time, development of AI, it should be able to give us a correct answer based on the docs we feed in.
Yes, it's integration test our docs.
Exactly. In fact, there is a multi-cluster docs test that caught things that the EDE test did not. So just planting a seed. Maybe I know the use of AI in open source is sort of a touchy subject, but I wonder if this might actually provide some value for making sure that we are conscious of things like affirmative voice when it comes to what is unsupported, as opposed to just making it absent from what is supported. I suspect if we would have done that, then we would have passed the AI test. So, just a thought.
It's actually really interesting because you normally see automated AI like prompt-based tests to grade the AI. Instead, we would be using it to grade the resources that we augment the AI with. It's interesting.
That's a crazy idea. Nothing to think
No,
about now.
It's pretty practical. Okay, so I think we have an agreement. I'm gonna record that key.
Yep.
Which is continues to not be supported, but continues to not be actively unsupported. Need to communicate and let users know that it will break.
Add some flashing text to the release notes.
Right.
All right, thank you.
I do think we should still survey users, by the way. Right, because I'm going to assume that some people think it's for Ingress and are just answering the context of Ingress use cases anyway, not actually waypoint ones.
Yeah.
And
also survey the user gives us another way to communicate to them. This is not supported for now for waypoint. I can send a quick Slack message because I'm an admin, so I could potentially add channel everybody. So everybody in the ambient channel will get a notification. So I can take a to-do on that.
That's great.
Yeah, great screen test. We're about to break you. Please tell us so we can know in the future. Okay, I think that's everything on that topic. Mitch, do you want to go back to the roadmap?
Keith, do you want to just at Zongo and Ziran on this comment, just so they know, especially the will break part, right? Like that's happening.
Yep. Good call.
Let's see. Oops. This is all I'm sharing. So I took the notes that we had put together in January about a roadmap and tried to put them into the voice of a blog post. I used our most recent roadmap blog post, which was from 2023. Or was it? I guess maybe it wasn't a blog post. Anyways, I found one in the Istio TOC drive that I sort of used as a template. Started by kind of looking back on the time since our last roadmap, or maybe even just the last year. We could tweak that. And then the themes that I pulled out, kind of the high notes of the notes that we had, was migration. I know that we've heard a lot about migration, multi-cluster ambient, and extensibility envoy filter, or some other, XProc, whatever the path forward in that space looks like. And then I sort of closed it with, we did talk a little bit about contributor experience. We've been talking for quite a long time about revamping the work group and work group leads roles. I think that we probably need to get that done this year. I know some of our contributors have struggled to gain recognition at their, or prove impact at their employers because of the lack of a really systematic way of recognizing contributions. So it's time for us to look at that. And we also need to revisit like our maintainers, make sure that they're actually actively maintaining. Particularly, there's been some drama in other projects in the CNCF recently related to maintainers who have been inactive for 3+ years, exerting some significant control over those projects. And we don't want to find ourselves in an uncomfortable position like that. We need to maintain that. So this is kind of what I threw together. I had Craig had weighed in on a few things, and I wanted to ask around here how we felt about this. I wasn't sure if you guys had had a chance to take a look.
I have not. I was on vacation last week. Sorry.
Yeah, same. I will take a look this week. Thanks so much for putting it together. Do you think, as far as the contributor experience, I know I heard CNCF is talking about like a badge program. I think it would be really cool if we can give out maintainer and contributor badge for Istio for some of our graduated project. Like you are a speaker for KubeCon, you are a program review committee. I think that might help with some of the employer recognition stuff.
I think that's a great idea. Do you know who you heard that from? Would that be like Bob Killen or?
Yeah, maybe Bob or George. Is it George?
I think it's George. I'll follow up with Bob and George and see.
Yeah.
I'm sure if it's not them, they'll know who it is.
Okay. Yeah. Keep me in the loop. I can try to ask around too if it's not both of them, because I do think that was we can be a pilot for that program. That would be great.
Sounds good. Well, I think that's all that's on the agenda, and it sounds like you all need some time to read this offline. Anything else we need to talk about this week?
On the maintainer, sort of checking in with existing maintainers, Craig has a PR that's open to do so. Might need to be refreshed in community, but we can have steering take a look in the next meeting to check in there.
We have an election coming up, don't we?
Yes, in May, the next TOC election
Okay,
takes place.
so it's next month. Okay.
Yes.
There it is. Okay. All right. Well, then it doesn't sound like there's anything else for us to do this week.
No. I do think if we are serious about revamping the working group lead program, we should probably make some moves towards getting that underway before we release the blog post. So I guess maybe an action item for folks to be thinking about what they want that to look like. I'm curious to hear from all of you as we discuss this, because I have wasn't around for the heyday of the working groups program, so I'd be love to hear what worked well, what didn't work well, and what we can do better. So looking forward to discussing on that.
So should
Sounds
we
good.
be discussing that in the next TOC? I guess is TOC the right place to discuss that? I just think so, right? Because TOC
so.
owns the work group leads program. Yeah, okay.
It might make sense to talk about, like, at least I can talk about my goals in revamping the program here. Let's see, this will be under contribute experience. So we want, on the one hand, we want recognition reward for contributors. The badges are a great start. I think that probably something beyond maintainer status, but not on TOC, is merited. We've had several users that I think were recognized as having years and years of really high quality contributions, but maybe not the sort of vision that we would look for in TOC. And we want to be able to recognize those users as extremely valuable to the project, make sure that their employers are happy with the impact that they're having, etc. Let's see, we do want to keep clean roles. I'd like to have a clearer design review process. Right now, we don't follow our documentation as to who needs to approve design docs. I had a coworker present a design doc on Wednesday, and overall, I think the feedback was positive, and we got done, and he said, "So is it approved?" And I said, "Well, yes-ish. I think you can start writing code, and you shouldn't hit too many objections." And that's fine if we want to make that the formal process of just pitch it, get a general feedback, and then start going. That could be our process, but I'd like to align our docs to whatever process we'd like to have. And then right now, we have all of our maintainers are structured into working groups that have ownership of different folders. And some of those probably still make sense and others do not. I think I might be the only active UX maintainer left. And I end up reviewing changes that I don't have a lot of insight or interest in. For those, I don't mind doing that. Like, it's not a problem, but I'm not sure that UX makes sense as a category for reviewer moving forward. And I suspect the same may be true of some of the other reviewer categories. Yeah, environments is one that a lot of people get stuck on. I think John is the only active reviewer there. So reviewing kind of the membership there, considering whether those structures still make sense and how we might be able to reorganize it. Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
One of the goals I would like to maybe get out of this is developing talent for TOC. I think having something between maintainer and TOC to allow people to have ownership over an area, display vision over an area. I think that helps for people to get to a place where maybe they want to be on TOC one day, but like you said, haven't demonstrated the vision yet. Working group lead gives them an opportunity to demonstrate that and learn those skills in just a smaller segment of the project versus an entire project. And I think it also helps us as TOC to be able to delegate more as well when it comes to things like roadmaps and things and such.
For my part, I also might add, oh, sorry, go ahead, Lee.
I was going to say, like, the delegation part, right, was the part that we found didn't work, right, at our scale. But I do agree we need a clearer set of, here's what you need to be doing to be considered for TOC. And if we want that to also be a phased recognition thing, fine. But we just need to lay out what the actual, like, the behavioral requirements are, rather than the titular ones.
Well, and one behavioral requirement that I think we left a little bit vague the last time we did roles was the responsibility to review pull requests. And I say this knowing that I fall behind on below average on number of pull requests reviewed. but especially with John's absence, I think we're going to start to feel the tension that we've all kind of not reviewed as much as we probably ought to, I suspect, and need to pick up some of that slack. So setting up a continuous expectation for moving forward that reviews are a regular part of the maintainer responsibility, and that you do have to be up to speed with those responsibilities to stay a maintainer.
We do actually, like in the steering committee election for TOC, we did actually lay out requirements for TOC.
Oh.
Yes, 5 different
As a rubric.
archetypes.
Yeah, there were these archetypes.
Yeah, but
Okay, I remember.
I guess Mitch is saying we need similar requirements for work group leads and maintainers too, for them to maintain active role to the community, right? So that we know these maintainers still deserve to be maintainers. And also, I think it's a good motivation for people to continue to be active in the community as well.
So our standard for maintainers right now is fairly high for getting in. I think you have to have 35 significant PRs in the space that you'd like to become a maintainer. And with the cadence of the project, 35 is a pretty significant number. On the flip side, once you become a maintainer, when we go to clean our roles each year, we look at who's been active in the last year. Those who have not, we put on the list of those to remove. But all we ask is that they respond to a GitHub message in order to stay a maintainer. So if they say, yes, I'd like to still be a maintainer, then they are. Now, I don't think that we have a significant problem today of, I'll say, squatting in the maintainer role. Most of the time when I point out that someone's not been active for a year, they'll say, yeah, no, remove me from the roles. I'm not working in that project anymore. But it would be good to have a clearer process, specifically because squatting has become a problem in other projects in the CNCF, and we are a fairly high profile project. I'd like to tighten that up just a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. One of the goals I have is I would love to see how we as a team can drive more contribution to Istio from outside of us, because we all know we are committed to Istio, so we contribute to Istio in one way or the other way as a team. But how do we, like every single year, I think CNCF published like how the projects compares in terms of contribution. And I feel like Istio is getting lower and lower, right? How can we place Istio in a more visible situation in terms of contribution compared with some of the other graduated projects? I think overall, the contribution, the bar of the contribution is relatively high, has been a challenge for the Istio project.
Yeah, that's a really difficult issue. We faced it with the last two Contrib Fests. Lynn, I think you and I did one in Utah, and then I did one with Jackie and Daniel in London.
Yeah.
And there were sort of two problems that we ran into. One maybe is more of a symptom, but there's almost never anything labeled as good first issue in the Istio project. And as I tried to fix that problem, I realized that part of the reason is it's really difficult to tell what's going to be a simple issue and what's going to be a tangled mess that's connected to years of history that you need to wade through in order to solve it. I don't know if we should consider that complexity to be irreducible. Just the fact that we're dealing with all of the network is a very complicated beast, and maybe it's always going to be that way. Or if there's things, best practices that we can start to follow to try and make your first pull request into the Istio project less intimidating. We've had a total of, I think, 50 people come through the Istio Contrib Fest program in the last year. To my knowledge, none of them have turned into regular contributors, and most of them would approach afterwards and say, great, now what should I work on? Give me an issue to work on. And I'd say, I have no idea. I'm sorry. I have a hard time finding issues that are good for me to work on, let alone for others. So I don't know if you all think that that's inherent or if that's an issue we can fix.
I wonder. Okay.
Go ahead.
sorry. I wonder if we could put this user to help us enrich the ecosystem of Istio. The reason I'm saying this is these type of work typically are not super complex and doesn't require deep knowledge around in the code. Sorry, my camera is not working. I tried to connect, as you can see. All right, somehow it connects to my phone. And so I wonder if we can put these not on the hardcore of Istio, because I do think the hardcore of Istio is going to require people dedicated time employed by their employer. But one thing I noticed is Istio is a project has a lot of connection to like Argo, Cert Manager, many of the other graduate and incubation project, OPA, Kavana. I wonder if we can leverage this user to build integration system for Istio, because I think it do help out a lot, increase Istio's eminence for the broader CNCF system, and also help these users to become like contributors to Istio and potentially to another project as well that Istio cares about to build the ecosystem around. I mean, that's just one thought. So I do agree with you, Mitch, because when you and I were working on Contribute Fast, we had to scratch our head to find out what's a reasonable issue for people to work on when they only have 2 hours. Yeah. Louis, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we like that core and ecosystem point. The ecosystem things, like maybe we're measuring wrong, right? Like there's, let's say, like take OPA, right, or an Istio. If you're integrating OPA and Istio, where are you going to put the integration, right? Istio already pre-cans, right, a feature to integrate with OPA, and OPA is the platform, right, that you're integrating with. So you're very likely to put the integration into OPA's ecosystem, not into Istio's. Similarly, the same thing happens in Argo, right? Because
Understood. Yeah, but it's great for Istio project. In fact, if we can put it together.
Right. So this is a measurement problem, not necessarily a contrib problem.
I agree. Yeah.
Whereas the contributions that have to occur in Istio are in the hard things, right? In the networking stuff, right? That's where it's forced. And so that might be actually what the effect is. Because Istio's job is to integrate up, not down. Right? There's no more down from where we are. Right? Like I guess the cert manager stuff and cert maintenance is a downward integration that we have, but everything else is an upward integration. And so that generally just favors that work being done in the ecosystems, the things we're integrating into, not that thing the other way around. So I don't know if there's a way to measure that at all.
I completely agree with Louis. I think most of what Istio's integration points look like are tend to be in places other than Istio, unfortunately. I do think that there's something to be said for exposing complexity is the wrong word, but teaching users and potentially new contributors about the complexity can work well, even when it's very complex things. I think about the way Cilium has sought to make eBPF something that feels approachable, even though it's fairly complex. There's a lot of nuances you don't get in the like initial eBPF, thin eBPF book that you get, but it's explained enough where you say, I want to go learn more. Like at the end of the day, our customers, our users, our developers, our people contribute to developers, they want to go learn. And so I do wonder if, last year or year before last, I sort of tried to kick off the architecture directory in Istio, like explain to people how Istio works. And I suspect that we might have some success in having people who are equipped to make somewhat more complex changes if we sort of show them how the sausage is made, so to speak. Because I think ultimately that is where, there's only so much bandwidth that people who are paid to work on Istio are going to have. And so to the degree that we can safely empower people with the expertise and the field to go play in. The degree we can empower that, I think that increases our productivity as a project. The key is that safety part. How can we make sure that we're able to, that the changes are good, that the code quality is good, and that it's something that we as TOC want to happen directionally. How do we help backstop our reviewer bandwidth, right? We talk about how it's just a function of open source. The more successful you are in a project, you become maintainer, then likely somebody pays you to do things out, in addition to that open source work. And so people get busy. How can we make sure there are people coming in behind TOC, behind people who are working group lead, who have the energy and the time to spend 5 out of their hours of the day reviewing or making code changes to areas of the project? Like, I think that's the problem that I think we need to solve in the contribution space. An ecosystem, while helpful, doesn't quite get us there.
I think it's a both way, because at the end of the day, I think you're absolutely right. We need contributors, we need maintainers, we need reviewers. I just don't have a good sense those would come. Like, none of us are casual contributors. Like, if you're not funded by your employer, I just have a hard time to envision they would have time to carve out, to be present at the community, to do anything beyond long casual contribution or code review. That's just my feeling. But if we can focus on, I think we need to do both, to your points. I was more talking about the other angle. If we can make Istio successful, hugely successful, more people willing to run Istio in their environment, integrate with the existing stack they already have, then that means they are funded as an Istio user by their company, right? That can feed back to the contribution, right? Because you've seen people like Carl Stoney contribute to Istio because they are an Istio user. You don't see people just jump into contributing to Istio when they don't have a relationship with Istio. They have to be, I almost feel they have to be supported one way or the other, whether they are funded by a vendor or they are a Istio user or operator, or maybe they have a Linux Foundation mentorship program, or somehow there is a financial aspect, in my perspective, associated with it.
100% agree. Yeah, that's a really great point. I sometimes wonder if, not that I want more hierarchy in the process, but I almost wonder on the contributor ladder question, what Kubernetes says is they have 2 different groups, reviewer and approver. I almost wonder, like, if that might potentially help. Like, if let's say Rob Salmond or other folks who are around in the community maybe aren't maintainers. If Rob reviews something and say it looks generally good, or somebody else, we can sort of delegate that trust to somebody and say, hey, yeah, this looks generally good. It's ready for a final maintainer pass. That helps me as a maintainer, helps all of us as approvers and maintainers to be able to see, okay, have this been through a first pass? And I can spend my time on those things that need more views. So, I mean, some things you're going to need to maintain a review right away, like this touching complex XDS code, or things like that. But I think, especially on areas like Istio CTL UX or things like that, somebody giving it a thumbs up, looks good, ready for the next pass would be great. Onwood does this as well, actually. They've got the regular maintainer review and the senior maintainer review.
Just to jump in, that like really resonates with me, because like sometimes I'll like review PRs from like people and for like Istio CTL or whatever, and it feels a little silly because they're like, is it good? I'm like, yeah, it's good, but like actually I don't have any say over, or direct say whether it gets merged or not.
Yeah, if you all feel that's useful, we can certainly entertain a role and would position. You have to be a reviewer, because part of the job of the maintainer is not writing code, is review other people's work. I don't have a strong feeling that I think it's reasonable to entertain it, especially as we're trying to build through the pipeline. And Ian just made a great comment. He had to take a PDO to make his contribution to Istio. That's funny. Well, thank you, Ian.
So and it's a relevant data point, right? I think it's fair to say that employer willingness to sponsor outside contributions has dropped over the last 5 years. Right, I think we've all seen that in the market broadly and the feedback. So I don't think it's surprising to see some across the board drop in CNCF. Right, I don't think this is just affecting Istio. We may actually be in a better situation than some projects where some projects don't have solid vendor backing. Right, well, obviously there are projects which do have vendor backing. But their contributions are dominated by those vendors, just as ours are. That's working as expected, if not necessarily as intended. And it would be a little bit naive to assume in the current climate that that's going to change drastically based on us pumping out certain types of content. We can certainly be structurally better, right? I definitely support trying to make it easier for people who want to be effective, right? As Stephen said, I think that's a good example, Stephen. So I just don't know if there's a large untapped universe. And, maybe more pragmatically is to get more vendors, right? There are vendors of Istio, right, who don't show up, so to speak, in the community in various forms. I'm not going to try and categorize those vendors, but that they exist. And getting them to spend some of their hard-earned on contributing back to the project in more direct ways may actually yield more direct results.
Yeah, similar to what Lynn said before. I think it's a both sort of thing. Like to your point, I don't think that there are. We're going to double our contributor count by tapping into users. That's not realistic.
Right.
But even if you get someone like 2 or 3 people to give who can spend some of their time to give a review or pass if nothing else, can really help get some things over the finish line. And I think that it feeds into the vendor point. Like if we make it clearer to a vendor what their business is going to get from contributing back to the project in the form of recognition, in the form of getting their things through faster. I think about when like March Madness for basketball happens in the US, they have this letter like convince your boss to let you stay home or whatever like that. I think Linux Foundation has done that sort of stuff in the past, like convince your boss to let you go and work in open source. Like I think that's sort of our goal is for when people go to their boss to say, hey, you deploy Istio in all those different places. It's enabled X number of dollars of savings over the past 3 years since you implemented it. It makes sense for us to contribute to the project. Please let me go do it. I'll volunteer a tribute. Here's what I'm going to get in return. I'm going to get to prioritize these things. I'm going to hit this first and this first. Like, I think making it clear to people what they're going to get out of it at the outset might help turn up more people who are willing. I think one vendor in particular that I talked to, who is having a growing presence in the project, said that initially it wasn't clear, like once their people got to maintainer, they didn't really see what the benefit was if they weren't going to be able to be on TOC or things like that. So I think all this feeds in. I think if you have to do all of these things actually, and I think we'll see benefits if we can make strides.
Yeah. So sounds like we should write a dedicated blog about this when we have the process formalized and explain, and particularly the benefits to people. Yeah, I agree. It's not super clear. Well, these are the past 7 years contribution. It's funny your thing says 7 days, which I thought was 7 days, but it's from the beginning of the project.
So that's the 7 days moving average. So every data point represents 7 days of pull requests. I probably ought to drag that out so it's not quite so noisy, but I don't think we'll ever go back to like 2020, 2021 contribution levels. I don't think that we need to. That was just a very different time. But just knowing sort of the economy that we're in, so to speak, where there aren't that many contributions, in 2020, we could afford to have potentially interested developers who have the possibility of a job in Istio, but are sort of dipping their toe in the water. If they didn't pan out, it really wasn't a massive loss. We had a ton of momentum. Now I feel like we really need to make sure that work stream is optimized and as smooth as we can make it. We can't afford to have people trying to get into the project, and even with the potential of an employer backing them, and then have that not work out. It's a lot more costly today than it was in, say, 2021.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the metric I would look at, Mitch, right? Like 2020 was probably peak churn. Like 2018 through 2020 was peak churn for a whole bunch of reasons, right? And so much pruning occurred. Things started to get sensible, right? 2022, right? Ish.
Yeah.
That's a better kind of indication. And also, you do want like the churn rate to go slow down, right? Like we don't want to build everything.
Yeah, no, I don't think this is not a make Istio great again moment where I want to get back to 1,000 contributions per week. It's more just I want to understand that losing a potential contributor today is much more important than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, so I would look at like the mean time, like even the mean time to like a PR getting committed should go up over time. It should cap out, right? It shouldn't, right? It shouldn't keep going up. It should get to a reasonable stable point and kind of stay at that point. If there's a lot of fluctuation in then that's usually indicative of like a functioning problem in the project. I don't know if we have that metric though.
There is a pull request time.
No.
Like a time to merge or something like that. Time to engagement.
Time to
merge repository groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'd want to zoom way out. Oh, it's actually gotten a lot better since 2022.
Yeah, so yeah, that's what I think. Like the churn rate was so high in 2022, there were just like PRs flying all over the place, dangling, not getting reviewed, not getting like just a mess, right?
Yeah.
Things started to settle down in 2022, which, yeah, I would say that actually looks quite good.
Yeah. What's the actual number here? 0.54 hours?
30
That
minutes
doesn't make a
before
lot of sense.
median time.
Those be the automated PRs.
Oh, the average says 2.26 days, right?
Okay, so we've got some skew, a long tail. That's not surprising.
Right, yeah. Like most commits should be straightforward. The bigger ones will be spiky. That's okay. That probably correlates to size.
Yeah, the 2.26 days is the 85th percentile. Median average is like 3 hours. So it feels reasonable.
Yeah, some are probably reasonably straightforward. Like I tweaked a thing, I go back and forth, the reviewer gets submitted. That actually looks healthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's way lower than I expected.
Yeah, I'm sure if we had 95th percentile, I'm sure it's probably in the 2-week range. But so that would be for the bigger PRs. That might actually be. I don't know if there's that metric is available. 85th percentile is not bad though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suspect a lot of
nice.
We have a lot of like release PRs and like docs fixes. Actually, I wonder if you change it to just Istio. I wonder if that meaningfully changes things because we're getting like docs and API changes in there as well. No, still pretty reasonable. Okay. Yeah.
But it's not much.
Yeah. Good job, us.
Surprisingly
one really
good.
bad week.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably some Okay, so like the 3.2 week max, right, on an 85th percentile also kind of adds up. That doesn't feel too skewed.
It doesn't feel right though, because as max, because I've seen
Right, but of the 85th percentile, that's the max, not the 99th percentile.
Oh, that's fair. Okay, that's right. That's right. The 85th comes from, yeah, yeah.
Right, so probably the 99th is like the entire duration, right, of the period. It just didn't get submitted, or didn't get reviewed, or just got left there, abandoned. Like 85th is like, I don't mind it as a metric here. And the fact that we're actually getting faster is good.
Yeah.
Right. It's an indication of aggregate stability. It probably means that PRs are smaller.
Yeah, it is overall. This is a better picture than I expected to see looking into this for sure.
Yeah, so like 2022 through 2023 and 24, right? We were starting to do ambient development, right? Big PRs, long reviews, lots of thought and evolution. Shipped ambient. Right, and ambient
Beta
shipped
2024 early.
2024, right? But most, like, everything became pretty small once we hit beta, right? Like most of the big rocks had been solved. And then everything became incremental again. This is actually quite good.
Yeah. There is, I know we're at time, I'll just share this real quickly. There is one other tool that I use for looking at things like this, and it's newer, so I don't know if everyone's aware of it. This is the LFX Insights. It's a lot of the same data, but it's looked at in a different way. Top contributors, top contributing companies, health in terms of what hour contributions are happening, are people working on weekends and the like. Anyways, just another way of looking at various project health information. It's just called LFX Insights. If you haven't used it before, you can get there from Google. So, okay, well, thanks for looking over this stuff with me and kind of pondering what Contribx improvements we might want to make. I'll try to have maybe a write-up ready for us in 2 weeks, just real briefly on some of the things we've talked about, and see if we can move that forward at all. In the meantime, I'll watch for comments on the roadmap.
Awesome.
All right, sure.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you.
See you.